We'll just start out by saying that we have some time constraints of an hour due to other commitments, so we're trying to fit in. So we will manage the meeting accordingly and would ask that, that we all keep that in mind as we go through the agenda today.
Chairman, all 7 members are either present in person.
All right, so we have a quorum plus some. Please silence your communication devices, if you would. Public comment period, nobody has requested the opportunity to speak. Is anybody online wish to speak during the public comment period? If not, we will move on to the approval of the minutes from the September 28th meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the minutes will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. And we'll move on to the educational presentation, 2022 budget, part 1, annual budget process. Is that?
Sure, I can start that out, and Christie and Mr. Chairman, you can follow up. So again, at your last meeting, you did receive, you accepted the administrator's proposed 2022 budget. The process that's laid out for you today is further consideration of that document, and specifically that's going to take place in items 5B, 1A through E. Now, 5B1A certainly is related to the budget, and it specifically relates to the one-time adjustment that we discussed at the previous meeting. But the remaining items, 5B1B through E, really allow for you to discuss potential amendments or changes to the administrator's budget that was proposed, which again is now your budget. You've received it. Those modifications would then be should they be accepted, Christie would modify the resolution for the 2022 budget and property tax levy as required under item 5B2A for your ultimate vote to forward on to the county board. So that's the process that's being envisioned through your agenda today. And as the chairman said, it's quite a significant agenda in terms of information to get through. But that's the process, at least as it relates to the 2022 budget.
Christie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
There was one typo on the adjustment for prior year levy. The year was stated as 2018, and that has been changed to 2021 as in your packet.
All right, then again, I'd just like to go over the process or timelines. So today, the issues before us, we accepted the administrator's budget last week, and today it's up for us for approval, subject to any amendments that individuals may have. On Thursday, we will present it to the county board for informational purposes. We have a public hearing scheduled for November 5th. We have sent out under Kurt's and my signature a notice to the county board asking that they forward to us by the end of the day on the 5th any proposed amendments. This committee will meet to review those amendments on November 9th at our regular meeting and make a recommendation, but they will be considered as amendments to the budget at the county board meeting later that evening on November 9th. So that's our schedule. So we will, today's action will basically create the working document that the county board will be working off of, and any changes to it after today will be in the form of an amendment that will need county board approval. Any questions relative to the process? All right. If not, we will move on to 5A. There are no tax deed properties, so we'll move to 5B. The resolution approving adjustments to the state property tax limit for 2022 budget. And perhaps because that's contingent upon whether or not we have any amendments, we should deal with the budget message first, and then the budget, the 5-year budget, and other things. So we'll deal with that later, because that may be modified based upon any action that we take. So I will turn it over to Lance to see if you have anything you want to add relative to that. We had the presentation last week.
Nothing to add.
So do the committee members have any questions or comments? Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just would like to, again, reiterate what I had said last week, and thank the administrator and staff for putting together what I feel is a very good budget, very thought out, and well-organized budget, and providing also the information and the rationale for doing what in one case is taking advantage of a one-time levy limit adjustment that in turn is also reducing the total cost to the taxpayer, because it's utilizing those dollars to fund CIP projects that would be in turn borrowed for. So we haven't increased the spending. However, we have just identified where we're receiving the funding for, or from, to pay for. So again, I just want to extend a sincere thank you to the administrator, staff, and all the department heads for their hard, diligent work in providing us a balanced budget that is responsive to the needs of the taxpayers of Marathon County.
Any other comments? I'd like to just reiterate what our support and the comments made by Chair Gibbs, and I know that we've had a number of discussions both at the committee level relative to the assumptions going into the development of the budget, as well as some of the policy issues. The one issue that I'd like to just throw out for discussion today is that of the taking the $21,000 plus from University Extension and placing it in the administrator's work plan. We had a discussion. This is to work, the money had at one time been used for the community development person at Extension, of which Melinda Osterberg had filled the position. She's left to take employment with Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. And the question is should we continue that position within Extension or transfer that into the administrator's budget for special projects? The concern that we had relative to the Extension was the ability to control the work, and it was used to fund a half-time position in Lincoln and Marathon counties. And so it was split, so you had three bosses. You had Marathon County, Lincoln County, and the University Extension, and the concerns were that as we got into the broadband grant process, that there were certain things that they could and couldn't do under the Extension. The reason I raise it is because it's got a match, a 50% match from the state, so the 21 becomes 42, and gives us the opportunity to leverage additional resources. I think the issue of control is one that we ought to be concerned with, but I'm wondering if there's any thoughts relative to that position in trying to maximize the value of it by cooperating with Extension and in accessing those resources on this project.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think you raise a really good point, and perhaps, I certainly am open to the committee making amendments to the budget. Should you move the funds to UW Extension for purposes of continuing that position. I personally, my sense is that I would make a renewed effort, or I guess take a different approach than what had been historically the approach of, to your point, allowing much of the workload discussion to be had at the state level and at the committee level about an annual work plan, and instead change my perspective to be one of almost viewing that position as a contract position where I have a much greater hand in setting the day-to-day work. That has not historically been the way we've really approached extension. But should the committee be interested, I would certainly offer that up as an approach that I would take to essentially try to capitalize on that 100% match that the state would offer.
Chair Gibbs.
You know, I appreciate that thought. However, there's if you were listening to one of the presentations by the UW, they're moving in a little bit of a different direction, in that they're providing now area specialists through the state to fund education positions. For example, potentially, well, one example of it is the specialist in the cranberry field, in the cranberry growing operations. They've created a specialist that deals only in that and is responsive to that community. I think there's also additional specialists that they're looking at in creating for statewide positions, dairy experts and others. So although I understand the match position, I think that the clear ability to be able to have direction over a specific project is absolutely necessary. And as we had seen, although I totally appreciate the work that individual did in broadband, we also found that there was challenges because the university chose to, and rightfully possibly so, say that we had to stay out of some of the areas of positions or some of the areas of discussion. And that made it challenging. That it made it much more challenging to be able to get the exact work that we needed done when we needed it done. So I support the administrator's budget at this point, putting that $21,000 in for special projects that it can be dedicated.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion?
Supervisor Leahy?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But just to be clear, this doesn't affect any of the other positions within the extension office that we're currently utilizing?
Administrator Leonard?
That's correct. There's no other change to the administration, to the UW Extension budget. It
There-
simply relates to that community educator position.
There is in the budget, a decrease in the administrative support that has been absorbed by the extension.
Just to clarify that, we made the change actually this year. We had historically had a 1.0 FTE county employee providing administrative support to the UW Extension employees who are state employees. In conversations with Area Director Hausler, there was a discussion when that incumbent individual was retiring from her position about delivering that administrative support in perhaps a different way, and specifically that different way was to have the administrative support become part of the overall contract for services that Marathon County has with the University of Wisconsin Division of Extension. So stated differently, not only would Extension deliver the education services through the educators, but they would also be responsible for providing the necessary staff support for those educators. And we discussed that with the committee. From my perspective, that made more sense because it allowed UW Extension to essentially pool its administrative resources within the state to address issues. And quite simply, it was less expensive for Marathon County. So I didn't really see a downside to doing that. So with the understanding of the committee, we actually made that change to the 133 contract this year, and that process is continued in the 2022 budget.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we knew that going into. Chair Gibbs.
I think that the other thing that does is provides a little more clarity as to reporting relationships and supervisory relationships that was sometimes a bit clouded.
Any other questions relative to the budget? If not, we will need to work these through in sequential order. The first item would be the resolution approving adjustments to the state property tax levy limit for the 2022 budget. That deals with that catch-up of $716,000 plus dollars. Christie, did you? Are there, we talked about it at the last meeting. Any questions or motions? Chair Gibbs.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we move to the full board for its consideration the one-time adjustment to the operating levy limit for $716,160 as per calculations of the Wisconsin Department of Revenue.
Is there a second?
Leahy will second. Leahy will second.
Chrissy, you pick. Everybody had their hand up, or where was Supervisor, moved by Gibbs, seconded by Leahy. Any discussion? Again, this requires a 3/4 vote of the county board. Chair Gibbs.
I guess I would just remind the committee, you know, the rationale behind the motion is twofold. One, these dollars are operating dollars under the operating levy limit. Now, it is a one-time adjustment that we, as the administrator explained clearly last week, that is available to us by the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. However, we have taken those dollars and we have done what is fiscally responsible, and that is applied those to capital projects. So in other words, if we choose not to take this $716,160, we will borrow an additional $716,160 for a time period, whether that be a 10-year bonding or whether that be a 20-year bonding. Either way, we're going to pay bond counsel an additional amount, and we're going to pay financing on that $716,160 over the term of that bond. And that will cost the taxpayers more dollars. We are not, again, spending more dollars. We are just utilizing what resources and avenues that we have to pay for things that this county is clearly agreed that it needs to pay for. So with that, I clearly support the move to take the one-time funding.
It is, while it is one time, it's a one-time catch-up, it rolls into our base going forward. So please understand that if we don't capture it now, we will never be able to capture it again. And last year, we decreased taxes 16 cents. So I think that it's important for the future stability of our budgeting process that we do this. So any other questions? Any other questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to the budget. We have the budget before us. What are your wishes? We accepted the budget at the last meeting. Now it's before us for adoption. Do we want to recommend to the county board that we approve the budget as presented? Or are there any amendments? But we need a motion to get it on the floor to approve. Chair Gibbs?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve and forward to the full board the 2022 budget as presented by the administrator and spelled out in the budget resolution.
McEwen, second.
Moved and seconded to approve the budget. Is that including the resolution at this time, or should we have a separate motion on the resolution? Separate motion. Okay, so we'll, if you could withdraw the portion relative to the resolution, we'll have a separate vote on the resolution itself.
Okay, I will withdraw the portion of the motion that included the resolution.
All right. In the same way, agreeable to the second. Is there any discussion on that? Again, we'll have opportunities to amend through adoption on the 9th, but it will no longer be the committee's work product. It'll be the board's work product after that. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Next, we'll move on to the capital improvement plan, which was we had dealt with that earlier in the year. We recommended that in a preliminary form to the county board. It is now incorporated into, well, it's incorporated into the documents associated with the budget, but we need a separate motion on the capital improvement plan. What are your wishes relative to the capital improvement plan?
Fisher to motion to accept the current 2022 budget 5-year capital plan.
Is that accept and to recommend to the county board?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Leahy will second.
Moved by Fisher, seconded by Arstead to accept and recommend the adoption of the KIP plan. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Now we're on to the resolution for the 2022 budget and property tax levy. That's in your packet, subject to the, well, any questions relative to the resolution that establishes the tax levy? Any questions? If not, a motion would be in order. Chair Gibbs?
Mr. Chair, I would make the motion to approve and forward to the full board for its consideration the 2022 resolution setting the property tax levy.
Okay, is there a second?
Fisher to second.
Moved by Gibbs, seconded by Fisher to adopt the resolution relative to the property tax levy. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of adoption of that resolution will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Now we're on to the resolution requesting one FTE social service coordinator grant-funded position effective 10/21. 21, would that be 21 or?
Correct.
So are we asking the county board to act on that on Thursday?
Correct.
All right, so with that,
I
it's
believe
been,
it's on the agenda that way, but I'll follow up. It's certainly effective yet this year. That's the intent of the position request from social services. So I can provide some background if
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. So within your packet, you do have information relating to this social service coordinator grant-funded position. It's to assist in the execution of a child support grant, the Elevate grant. And you've heard from Social Services Director Vicki Tilka on this program before. Certainly, she's presented a number of times to the Health and Human Services Committee on this, what I'll call a different approach, a somewhat more nuanced approach to handling child support matters. And Marathon County was one of several counties selected to participate in this initial grant. More funds have been made available for that grant to support this position. It is a fully grant-funded position, so as a little bit of background, your rules require that new position requests first are reviewed by the administrator, then they go through an approval process that ultimately calls for them to be approved by the county board, but that process under ordinance 4.20 starts with the administrator. If I support the position request, it then goes to a standing committee, or in this case, actually a program committee, the Social Services Board. So it begins at the Social Services Board, then to the standing committee, which is the Health and Human Services Committee. If it's supported at each of those, it then comes to this committee, HR, Finance, and Property. Your rules require those position requests to come forward in three fashions. One, through your normal budget process. And the reason this isn't coming through in your normal budget process is that we were not made aware of this opportunity for additional grant dollars until after our budget process for departments was well underway. So apart from the normal budget process, new positions come before you, this committee, in either March or August. There's an exception, however, to that policy in the event, in terms of timing, in the event that the position is fully grant funded, which this position is. So that's the reason it's before you at this point. The grant dollars are available. Social Services Director Tilka would like to take advantage of those grant dollars as soon as possible because they are having success with the program. And again, you'll see within your packet, there's essentially a PowerPoint presentation that walks through what that child support Elevate grant, what that grant program provides in terms of services and some of the initial outcomes that begins on page 114 of your packet. So with that, I can tell you that, again, I fully support the grant dollars being utilized for this new position, as is the case with any grant position. If the grant funds no longer are available, the position will be eliminated. We would not fund that position with tax levy resources without informing the board of our request to do that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the packet materials beginning on page 114 and the new position request documents beginning on page 124. But the next step for this would be to go to the full board.
And again, the Health and Human Services Committee unanimously recommended
Correct.
creating the grant-funded position at their meeting week plus ago. Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the question I have, and I understand that, historically, we have not approved the grant positions if the grant funding disappears, in other words, continuing the grant-funded position, if the position is not funded. The question becomes, can we get a report, if that were to happen, as to whether or not there would be the likelihood that eliminating this program would cost us more by potentially putting some children back into a position where they may be housed other places. So I guess my request is, can we get a report if the grant funding disappears? Well, can we get a report both ways? A report of the success of the program and a report of the challenges if the funding were to disappear?
Certainly we can do that, and in fact, I will provide to the committee right after today's meeting a link to the presentation that was made before the Health and Human Services committee, a recording of the video where Vicky and her staff did appear before that committee and discussed each of the slides set forth in the document. And if you're requesting additional information, we can certainly make that available in terms of outcomes.
So question, is the position then does the position go away at the end of the grant funding pursuant to this motion? If the grant funding runs out, is the position dependent upon the grant funding for continuation?
I don't know that a motion has been made at this point, but certainly if a motion was made that had that contingency within it, the position would go away if the grant funding no longer existed.
And we have, just to point out, we have done that repeatedly in the past.
Correct.
Relative to grants. Chair Gibbs.
I'll make a motion that we accept the grant funding for the position, and that the grant-funded position, if not funded, would be eliminated, subject to review by this committee.
All right, is there a second? Second by McEwen. So the motion, just for clarification, is that we approve the position upon upon the end of the funding. The position would be eliminated unless reauthorized by this committee. That's the intent of the motion?
That is the intent.
All right, are there any questions? Any questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Now we're on to the final resolution of the unconditional guarantee of its pro rata share intergovernmental agreement in taxable revenue bond financing for Bug Tussle LLC. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike, who's been working with other attorneys to understand what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Chair Robinson indicated, I've been working with our bond counsel, Rebecca Speckhard from Quarles and Brady, on this issue for some time. There are also about 38 other attorneys across the state of Wisconsin looking at the same documents. So lots of attorney time and lots of back and forth on these. The documents that are in your packet are the documents that have been negotiated between our bond counsel and counsel for Bug Tussle Wireless. I've also reviewed the documents in detail from a legal perspective as far as the protections that they provide specifically to Marathon County. The first document is the final resolution, and that resolution, in summary, would authorize Fond du Lac County to issue bonds to fund the broadband project to be taken on by Bug Tussle Wireless. It also would approve a guarantee by Marathon County. We would be guaranteeing $25 million of the bonds to finance projects within the county. The guarantee is not allowed to exceed that amount plus interest. It does constitute general obligation debt of the county. This particular final resolution document has been negotiated. They did accept our changes. They've been pretty flexible with us. It does allow minor modifications to the remaining documents to be made as long as the underlying policies don't change and as long as Administrator Leonard approves of those changes. The other documents certainly are going to be subject to some additional minor editing. For example, I think all of them talk about county chairperson instead of county board chair, minor things like that. From a legal perspective, however, I can say, talking to bond counsel is confident that these documents provide as much protection to the county as we can in such a transaction. I've reviewed them as well. I think I agree with Attorney Speckhart's assessment that these documents provide protection. This is not a transaction without risk, as I think we're all well aware. This includes a guarantee agreement, certainly that the county would be guaranteeing its $25 million portion of the bonds that are being issued. There is also a reimbursement agreement where Bug Tulsa Wireless would be agreeing to reimburse us for any payments we're required to make under our guarantee agreement. And then Hilbert Communications, which is the parent company, is also agreeing to reimburse us if Bug Tulsa Wireless doesn't reimburse us. So there's a couple protections there. We're also being granted a mortgage on all of the property that's being constructed within the county. It's required to remain lien-free, and we are given the first or priority lien. We also get a security interest in any of the fiber or cables that are being laid within the county. Some of the other documents that are needing to be addressed and updated are a facilities access agreement to allow the county to access the towers and other items that are being built. And then there is an intergovernmental agreement between all of the participating counties that we're going to be required to join into to make sure that this bonding can be issued. So like I said, this is a project that does involve risk in the form of those bonds being issued. It does build in legal protections to the best of our ability. So at this point, the final resolution is in a draft that I feel is appropriate. The other documents are in a form that's close to being finalized, subject to those minor revisions.
So we received these documents, drafts quite some time ago, but the near final drafts last Thursday evening or Friday morning. So we've been reviewing them both with bond counsel and our financial advisor, as well as internal staff. And there will be a few tweaks to them. One of the issues is basically the access agreement, and Jerry Klein has been in discussions with them, and they originally called, they had an initial proposal relative to where the fiber is being laid, and they're continuing to work with that. I imagine that will be a document that will be very dynamic. I know that Steve Schneider is planning to meet with the Eastern Towns Association on Wednesday and the Western Towns Association next week to finalize where the fiber is going. They're trying to reach as many governmental entities as possible and meet the needs of the county. But in that is our 12 fibers or strands of fiber 24 that will be made available to the county, free of charge. We are responsible for hooking up, and then access to their tower facilities. There are still some tweaks that we're working through, and I would imagine we'll continue to work through, given the fact that, while this is the initial resolution, which will be based upon Fond du Lac County doing a borrowing of up to $200 million. There's $78 million of interest in terms of the counties that have signed up, and there's a potential that there will be additional borrowings going forward relating to other counties that have expressed an interest but aren't quite ready. We adopted our initial resolution last month, and now we're looking for the final resolution. There will be ongoing discussions, but I think what we're looking today is for authorization to adopt the final resolution and to authorize the appropriate county officials to continue to negotiate the clarified language favorable to the county in the remainder of the documents. With that, are there any questions for Mike, Lance, or others? Chair Gibbs.
Mr. Chairman, I guess this question, I'll pose it to Mike. Mike, as I understand it, we, Marathon County, would be held liable for up to the $25 million. Now, the question I have is, when that $25 million is borrowed, that money goes, as I understand it, into a trust, and it sits there with the trustee and is not allowed to be spent until the assets are actually placed in, well, not necessarily placed in service, but the bills that are appropriate for the assets that are being placed in Marathon County are placed in Marathon County. Is that correct?
That is correct. And just to clarify, our obligation is the 25 million plus interest, but you're absolutely correct about the trust.
And then I also understand that there is a trust put in place to receive the payments from Bug Tussle and there will be 1 year's worth of loan payments in that trust. So we will know in advance if there ends up being an issue and it's a cash flow issue or something other. In review of their past performance and discussing that with the exec from Fond du Lac County, they were never late on any of the payments of the projects that they had and always fulfilled their obligations and never fell back on the guarantee for Fond du Lac County. So I would support and do support this project. I've had several discussions, and in fact, anybody that was at the WCA conference may have attended the broadband expansion. Now, one of the concerns that they have is they believe that fiber to the home is the choice, preference for anybody for broadband expansion. I think the reality that we have to live with is also the discussions that I had just yesterday or last week with NACO and National Counties Association. They understand that yes, fiber to the home is the Cadillac and the preference. However, there is a reality in that the RDOF grants, and there's challenges there that is a build out of over 10 years, and potentially that becomes very challenging for individuals in this county to be able to have no increased access to broadband for the next 10 years. It may put them clearly at an economic disadvantage for economic stimulus moving forward, and it also may put them at the citizens of this county at a disadvantage for access to telehealth and education. So even though we have a risk, there's nothing that is guaranteed forever. I support the project moving forward. We have worked on this for 13 plus years, and to everybody's dismay, we were hoping that the providers would step forward and provide broadband service throughout this county. That really hasn't happened. This is an opportunity to actually make that happen and move forward for broadband in this county. And in looking at total availability, it does another thing, and that is provides potentially, not potentially, does provide additional cell service access throughout this county, which is clearly a critical issue for individuals having access to 911. So I support the project, and I would make a motion to approve the final resolution.
And authorize appropriate county officials to continue to negotiate language satisfactory to the county?
Absolutely. It's just what I said.
That's what I thought. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Gibbs,
Fisher to
second by
second.
Arstad. Let me just point out, too, the importance of this came home last Friday when the Public Service Commission announced the awards relative to the grant. We had 9 grant applications in for Marathon County, 1 was funded. Serenity Wittenberg Telephone for the one up with the Nori Lake. The rest were not for a variety of reasons, and we need to figure out how we can be more successful with the Public Service Commission going forward, but we were not. So it's this is a good opportunity for us to advance it with adequate protections and guarantees. And so any other questions? Any other questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. That is all we have on the agenda. We're very efficient today. Our next meeting is next Tuesday. We'll focus in again on the ARPA and potentially a few other items. If time permits, we'll talk about the strategic plan. So we will see you then. Anything else? Any other announcements? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Move to adjourn.
Moved by Supervisor McCune, second by Arstad. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. We are adjourned.